What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Chuds BBQ. My name is Bradley Robinson, and today I'm going to show you how I made this. Beautiful, delicious, smoky, scratch-made, amazing, delicious steak frites featuring a big old bone-in tomahawk ribeye and some homemade French fries with some hollandaise sauce on the side. Coming up. This is some meat. Pat it dry. And what I got here is an absolutely beautiful tomahawk. Got this from my friends over at Porter Road. And I gotta say, they did a great job packaging this thing, you know. As someone who's tried to vac seal many bone-in steaks before, it can be really difficult to do that without popping the cryovac, so good on them. It's also nicely tied up, which is super convenient, because with a big 3-pound steak like this on this big old bone, it's pretty easy for this to fall apart. And I don't know about y'all, but whenever I think about summertime, I think about grilling season. And whenever I think about grilling season, I think about steaks. And whenever I think about steak, you gotta think about the tomahawk. I mean, look at this magnificent thing. Definitely the biggest showpiece in the roster. And at the end of the day, it's a ribeye, you know? Lots of tender meat, lots of intramuscular fat, very flavorful, super thick. Feed a whole crowd with this thing. And because Porter Road does such a nice job with their butchery, there is absolutely nothing I need to do to this thing except get it seasoned. And because it is such a thick cut of meat, getting this seasoned at least a few hours before you intend on cooking it is a good move. An overnight dry brine is another great option. And it can take a lot of salt. It's pretty much impossible to oversalt this thing. But by salting it ahead of time, it gives that salt time to dissolve, pull out some moisture, and then kind of reabsorb that moisture. And ideally, try and get this thing seasoned as much of the way through as possible. And we're not gonna forget the sides. And with a steak like this, we will likely still need to finish it with some finishing salt at the end. But a nice layer of salt. I'm also going to go on with some granulated garlic, not too much, as well as some freshly cracked black pepper from the good old-fashioned pepper cannon. Beautiful. And look at this fat cap as well. Love it. But now on a wire rack on this tray in the fridge this goes for the next few hours to let that salt start to do its thing. And if you're in the market to get a tomahawk steak just like that one, consider going to the sponsor of this video, Porter Road. By now I am sure you're familiar with Porter Road. I've been cooking their meats for years on this channel and off the channel, both in sponsored videos and in normal videos. That's because I'm genuinely a big fan of what they do. And if you're unfamiliar with Porter Road, they're an online butcher shop based out of Nashville, Tennessee that specializes in really high quality meats, whether that's whole carcass dry aged beef, heritage breed pork, chicken, they've got some charcuterie and other stuff. And as I mentioned, they just put care into every step of the process, which is great not only from an ethical standpoint, but also the meat really does speak for itself. And as someone that's done a lot of butchery in my career, I can really appreciate the work that goes into what they do. That tomahawk was perfect, nicely tied up, the vac seal was perfect on it, zero trimming required. And like I mentioned, all their beef is whole carcass dry aged, which really concentrates the flavors and makes for a great end result. And if you've never bought meat online before, I highly recommend it. It's just like going to the butcher shop because they're always updating the website with what's in stock. Oftentimes they're coming out with new cuts as well. And not only just familiar cuts like pork butts, ribeyes, strip steaks, things like that, but they also have all the butcher cuts that you're not going to find at the local grocery store. Things like volcano shanks, hanger steaks, pig wings, beef belly, all sorts of great stuff. And as someone that does a lot of cooking in the backyard, I really appreciate being able to play with different cuts and try to find the next good thing. And the fact that the meat ships right to your door is super convenient. And as much as I love their beef, their pork is absolutely fantastic. You know, back at Leroy and Lewis, we cooked a lot of heritage breed hogs. And once you taste really good pork, it's really hard to go back to the commodity stuff that you're going to get at the grocery store. Highly recommend it, folks. So if you're in the market to stock your fridge this summer with some really high quality meat, head to porterroad.com, or using my link you can save 15% off your first order. Again, link in description, that's porterroad.com, or using my link you can save 15% off your first order. Thank you, Porter Road. Today we're knocking out one of my favorite dishes, steak frites. And if you're unfamiliar, it's steak and French fries. I mean, what better combination is there than that? But while our steak dry brines, it gives us plenty of time to knock out some French fries, which luckily I got started several days ago. When it comes to making French fries at home, it is a lot more difficult than I ever imagined, and that's because a lot of restaurants are using potatoes that we simply can't get. A lot of the fries you're gonna get at restaurants or frozen in the grocery store or at fast food joints use a specialty type of potato, sometimes even their own strain that they keep under lock and key. And a lot of restaurants will use Quebec potatoes, which work really well because they have a better starch to sugar ratio, and you can find those if you go to a restaurant supply store or the farmer's market or something. And I went to several grocery stores and couldn't find any variety like that. So for the home cook today, we are sticking with russets, but in order to make them come out as good as possible, we have to put them through a lot more than if we had the right kind of potato. So first things first, I got these soaking in water. I went for a pretty standard French fry size, but of course you can make these as big or as small or as thick or as thin as you like. And I'm basically gonna treat this like rice, meaning I'm gonna go put this in the sink and I'm gonna let that water run and flush out and keep stirring it up to get as much surface starch off of this as possible. And that's because if we were to drop these in the fryer right now, they would turn brown immediately because there's too much starch. So we need to clear out as much of that as possible. So I'm gonna go wash this until the water runs clear. And I've tried a lot of different recipes and techniques, different potatoes, different cooking processes, and of course the one that I like the most is the most involved. So this is gonna take a couple days, but I'm pretty happy with the results. Yukon Golds also work really well, but they're just not quite that classic French fry, you know what I mean? And now that all the starch is removed, you can see that water is crystal clear. I'm gonna go in with a pinch of salt, start the seasoning process, get a little osmosis going on. And now we're gonna soak these overnight. And what that's gonna do is draw out even more starch, plump them up a little bit, and really help make sure they don't get too brown too quickly, which is the problem with frying russets 90% of the time. So in the fridge this goes overnight. One overnight soak later, these fries are looking pretty much exactly the same. But like I said, I've tried it with the soak and without the soak, and the soak definitely makes a difference. So next up is stage one of our 3-part cooking process. So on the burner over here, I've got a big pot of water coming up to a boil. And basically we're gonna boil these until they're pretty much cooked through. That's gonna burst some starch granules, which will help get them crispy and make it so when we're frying them, we're really just going for that color and that crispy exterior. We're also gonna add some vinegar and salt to that water because when you cook potatoes this thin through, they tend to be pretty mushy and break apart. But the vinegar has something to do with the pectin in the potato and makes it so it doesn't break apart nearly as easily. Now that our water's up to a boil, big fat pinch of salt goes in, as well as a healthy splash of some white vinegar. Beautiful. So now in we go with our fries. I'm gonna boil these for about 5-10 minutes. I'm gonna just keep probing them with a thermopan, make sure they're tender but not too far cooked. It's been about 5 minutes on these, which is pretty quick. When I was testing this recipe, I was using my indoor stove, and it took about 10 minutes, but I got a really powerful burner out here, so just really going for that like al dente potato situation where you can get through it, but it's not too mush. So now out these come onto a paper towel to drain. Now that these fries have cooled down a little bit while this fryer came up to temp, how you doing? We're gonna drop them into the oil for a par fry. Right now we're at about 250, 285. Anywhere between 250 and 300 is kind of where you're aiming. We're just gonna drop these in for like a minute or two. This is gonna set the exterior, building that first layer of flavor. And it's gonna help us get a nice crispy double fried French fry. Again, not trying to get any color on these, just trying to set the starches on the exterior. And just like that, when these are looking nice and tacked up on the outside, starting to take on just a whisper of color, out these come onto a wire rack to drain of excess oil. And we repeat with batch 2. And just like that, out of the fryer, looking really good. Definitely got some good micro blisters on there, but are still looking nice and pale, which is exactly what we want. So now we're gonna pop these in the freezer. And you can get away with just a couple hours on these things, but you really wanna freeze them through. And once they're frozen, you can pop them in a bag and you've got yourself some homemade frozen fries. Or of course, you could just buy some frozen French fries, which would be a lot easier and probably better. But alas, in the freezer, these go overnight, which is gonna make the interior a lot fluffier and make sure they don't get overcooked when we flash fry them tomorrow. About 4 or 5 hours later, this steak is looking good. You can't really see much salt on there anymore. Obviously the granulated garlic and pepper are still in there, but the salt has done its job to penetrate as deep as it will into this steak. Smelling really good, looking a little bit darker, a little bit more firm, but now I think it's time to fire up the pit. Now when it comes to searing a big thick steak like this, the reverse sear method makes a lot of sense. That's where you cook it indirect for the first half of the cook, bring it up to around 120, 125 internal, sear it off and call it a day. But I'm not a big fan of that method just because I'm really all about a good crust on this thing. I would rather have a well done piece of meat with a good crust than a perfect medium rare that looks gray on the outside. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that. So if we're doing a traditional sear, I can really focus on getting the crust I'm after and then let it slowly come up to the temp I'm after, giving me a lot more control. because with the reverse sear method, I'm always super stressed out when I'm searing it at the end that I'm gonna overcook it. So today we're going with the traditional sear on this behemoth of a piece of meat. So now that this grill is ripping hot, we're gonna go ahead and hit it with some beef fat spray, just to lube up those grates a little bit, and then take our beautiful tomahawk ribeye and just sear it to perfection. Nice even contact, trying to get a nice hard sear on this bad boy. Wow, that is hot. And best part about the Chud grill, if you're worried that it's too hot, just go ahead, slide that over. Let it cook on the hot metal. Been just a couple minutes, and we're starting to get some really good color on there. So now I'm gonna flip it over this way, get some color on the other side. Woo. Beautiful sear, trying to get some color, render the fat, and obviously get some wonderful flavor on there. There's really not much better than cooking a giant steak on a grill, you know what I mean? Oh yeah, nothing to worry about. And this giant tomahawk still fits. Gotta love that. Just the smells alone is worth all the effort. That's the beautiful thing about a tomahawk. You got a handle. Really easy to sear off the edges too. Got to be careful though, because that's where the fat cap is, and that can cause some flare-ups. And we don't want to burn the string, but luckily it doesn't take too long to get some color over there. Sizzle, sizzle. It's a showpiece. You know, if someone walks over to your house and you got this on the grill for dinner, I mean, come on. Who's not going to be impressed? Just getting some nice even color on this bad boy, and we are pretty much there. Gotta love that handle. Beautiful crust on that. Sizzling away. Looking beautiful. I'm going to slide this over. So at this stage in the cook, I've got the color I'm after. I've got it completely offset from the coals, so nothing is cooking except for the residual heat in the grates. And I'm gonna let it rest for a good 10-15 just to see what that really hard sear did to the internal temp of that thing. Kind of let it rest, let all the heat transfer through the meat, and then we'll know how far the carryover takes the internal temp of that steak and see how many more degrees we need to go. After about 10 minutes, we're up to about 85 degrees internal, so down this thing goes. I'm gonna shut this thing down. Gonna close top vent number 1 to create an indirect airflow over the steak to bring it up to about 120, 125 degrees. And while we wait for that steak to come up to temp, it gives us plenty of time to make a quick hollandaise sauce. Starting by melting down 2 sticks of butter. Oh yeah. And once that is fully melted and up to a boil, we're gonna set that aside before busting out a container with 3 egg yolks, to which we're gonna add a pinch of salt and a nice squeeze of some lemon juice. Then bust out the immersion blender and get right in there. And then while it runs nice and slowly, take our boiling butter and pour it in very slowly. And just like that, in a matter of seconds, a beautiful hollandaise sauce. Oh my God, that is so good. It's ready to go. And just like that, super quick and easy, velvety hollandaise sauce really comes together super quick. And for a steak like this, you could obviously go with a béarnaise. I've got a whole video about that. If you want a sauce with a little more complexity, which is pretty much a hollandaise plus shallots and tarragon and other flavors, but a classic hollandaise really never gets old. It's perfect for adding richness to a steak, as well as dipping your french fries in. Back over at the grill, I just temped this bad boy right around 125 degrees internal, so I'm gonna pull this off and let it rest. Probably should carry over a little bit, but hopefully not too much, because we already gave it that little mini rest in the beginning. And at this point, I would normally throw some butter on top to melt down, but we just made hollandaise sauce, so I think we'll get our butter fixed a little later on. At this point, our steak is resting down, our hollandaise is made, our fries are frozen, so that's the next thing we gotta do. We just gotta drop those fries, plate up, and enjoy. I've got this deep fryer fired up to about 350 degrees. It's full of peanut oil and some beef tallow. Porter Road was kind enough to send me some beef tallow, and I was running low on oil, so I topped it off with that. So these fries should be extra good. Got them in a little bag here. I'm just gonna go ahead and toss a bunch of them in. Really doesn't take long for the second fry, folks. They're fully cooked at this point. We're just trying to build that crusty exterior, make them nice and crunchy, and not too dark. That's the thing I'm really worried about, is if these get too dark, they're not gonna look like McDonald's French fries. And after about 1 or 2 minutes, these are looking pretty good, golden brown. Give them a little shake, and then into a bowl lined with a paper towel. Beautiful. And fresh out of the oil, we're gonna let that paper towel drain all the excess. I'm gonna hit it with a little Chuds BBQ secret salt, the perfect salt for fries. Just a nice dusting, and give those a little toss. At this point, paper towel can come out. And if you want to be extra fancy, you bust out some Parmigiano Reggiano and do a nice little smattering across the top, as well as a pinch of some dried parsley, mostly just for color, so people think you tried a little harder than you did. Give that one more toss, and our beautiful French fries are finally done. And one other final thing I like to do before serving a steak at my house is just give it one last kiss of flame, because it's been resting for a while now, but we don't want to serve it cool. So one last quick sear to bring the temp up, add a little extra color if you need it, and this bad boy is ready to slice into. And there it is, folks, a beautiful, gigantic tomahawk steak seared to perfection with a big mountain of some homemade crispy fries. I mean, what's not to like here, folks? A beautiful, deep, charred tomahawk ribeye with some homemade French fries with some hollandaise sauce to dip it all in. Yeah, I'm ready. I don't even know where to start, folks. As good as this super creamy hollandaise sauce looks in these fries, I mean, well, I guess I already dipped, so. That is so good. But we gotta cut into this steak and see how I did. Starting by removing the strings. Yoink! Don't want to eat that. And in the past, I've struggled with cooking tomahawks because, believe it or not, I don't cook 3-pound tomahawks on the regular, and it's a pretty easy thing to overshoot. So let's see how we did. Got some good gnawing right there. That's a good sign. I could separate the spinalis, or I could just dive right in, which I think I'm gonna do. So far looking pretty good. I know the YouTube lighting really doesn't do well for medium rare steaks, but in person that is looking like a perfect cook. Looks a little more medium on camera, but either way, pretty excited about it. Decent edge to edge. We've got a little gray banding from that hard sear, but I'm here for it. Now, if I was actually gonna plate this dish up, I would start out with a nice dollop of our hollandaise. Give that a nice little schmear. Take some of our beautiful tomahawk ribeye, shingle that down just like that. And of course, our beautiful fries would go right on the side like that. And then I'd eat one off camera. Maybe a little extra fries, why not? Then I top these with some freshly grated parm, bust out some Jacobson flaky salt for the steak, and only because it's right here, a little extra parsley for that pop of color. And there it is, folks, steak frites, Chuds BBQ style. All right, y'all, I think it's time to see how this piece of meat came out. Looking pretty good to me. I mean, it's a bone-in tomahawk ribeye. Like, what do you want me to say? It's fantastic. You got a little bit of that dry-aged flavor from Porter Road, but not too far in the funky direction, just enough to kind of concentrate the beef flavors. Salt level is there. I do think I overcooked it just a smidge, you know? I'd like a little bit more rare than that, but this is still a very happy medium. And when it comes to a ribeye, like a really fatty cut, shooting a little over works out pretty well because you render more of that fat. Oh, that spinalis, so good. As for these fries, that took like a week and a half to make. I mean, they're really good. The Parmesan, a little extra saltiness, that umami. It's a solid French fry, you know? Is it as crispy as something you're gonna get from Ore-Ida or McDonald's? No, but the flavor is just fantastic. If you've ever been to P. Terry's here in Austin, it's a little more similar to that. And I like their fries quite a lot. They're not too dark, they're crispy, they're fluffy, they're well cooked. It's a solid French fry. And like I said, I tried a lot of different methods, and this is the best recipe I could come across. But next time I make fries, I think I'm gonna have to hunt down some of those special potatoes. But throw a little hollandaise on there. I love hollandaise. It's so ridiculously good. Easy to make too. Speaking of which, little steak, frite, hollandaise action. You got that charcoal flavor. You got that super high quality beef. Pair it with French fries. I'm a happy guy. So we got a tomahawk ribeye cooked on the charcoal grill. We got some homemade French fries to the best of my current ability. And hollandaise sauce because it goes good with everything.
Yeah, I like the hollandaise a lot. The fries are good though.
It's so good.
I know you've been laboring over these fries.
It's been like 6 months. And they're still, well, I'd like to hear your opinion.
I think they're good. They definitely could be slightly more crunchy.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think this is the peak russet.
Yeah.
This is as good as you can get. They are delicious.
They are really freaking good. They're using like proprietary fries, like potatoes that they have.
It's a good fry though.
Yeah. All right, let's try the steak.
Did you say steak?
Ooh, that is exactly how I like my steak. Not too rare. Not too well done.
That's why I shot for a medium. It's because that's what you like, not because I'm a failure.
You're not a failure. And it's not like super fatty, but it's still very tender.
Well, to be fair, this plated up version, I trimmed away a lot of the intramuscular fat because I know you're not a fan of the blubber. There's a lot of more complicated sauces you could pair with this, like a béarnaise or like a pan sauce or a wine reduction. But to be completely honest, I haven't had a hollandaise in a long time. It is so perfect for a steak and potatoes dinner because I don't want to turn anybody off, but a hollandaise is essentially mayonnaise made with butter instead of oil. And it is so tasty.
They're really good.
Ah! Ah! And of course we got this big bone. I don't think we're allowed to give cooked bones to dogs. Otherwise...
She's eyeballing it though.
Oh, so much char around the bone.
Mountain man.
I've never seen you eat this much steak before.
It's been a minute.
This is where the video just fades to black because I'm just eating dinner at this point. And with this very last bite of tomahawk ribeye, I think it's time for the official taste test. Ow! All right, y'all, and that is it. That is how to make some absolutely amazing steak frites at home on the charcoal grill. I highly recommend giving this one a try, and you don't have to use a gigantic tomahawk ribeye, although you probably should because it's a fantastic cut. There's a cicada freaking out on my light right now. But of course, any steak you got will work really well. And as far as the fries go, I will definitely be making these time and time again. I know it's a bit of a process, but I really like the way they came out. And they may not be the crunchy fries we know and love, but that does not mean that they are not absolutely fantastic. But all that being said, if you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting that subscribe button. Let YouTube know by dropping a like on this video. If you give this recipe a try for yourself, be sure to tag me on Instagram at Chuds BBQ. I'd love to see what y'all are cooking. Big shout out to all the Patreon members. Thanks for supporting Team Chud and allowing me to keep making all these videos. And until the next time I see you, please go cook something outside. Peace.